Welcome to the Dinosaur George podcast, a show about paleontology and other earth sciences. Dinosaur George is a public speaker, author, and TV host with 30 years of study in paleontology. He has performed live in over 4,500 events across the US and Canada. Now, here is Dinosaur George.
Well, hey there, everybody. It's good to be back again. For all of you out there that have written to me and asked me about what's going on with the weather here in Texas and whether or not I was affected by it, I'm based in San Antonio, and the benefit for me and for all of my fellow San Antonians is that we missed the brunt of the storm. We were very fortunate. Unfortunately, a lot of the other people in our state were not. For instance, all the people in and around the Houston area, all up and down the coast, it was absolutely devastating for them. So I appreciate your concern and your emails and your kind words. But myself and my family and my friends were absolutely fine. But boy, everybody up along the Texas coast from Corpus Christi all the way up the coast, all the way up to Galveston, just my heart goes out for you guys. Let me explain a little bit about this storm in case you don't understand the size of it. It's been estimated that Hurricane Harvey dumped 15 trillion gallons of water in its wake. 15 trillion gallons of water. It is hard to get your mind around. It's hard to understand that much water. But that plus the high winds, it was just devastating. But let me say this. Although it is truly hard to imagine the loss of property and life and pets and family and all of those things, there will be good things coming from this. And we've already seen them. We've seen people coming from all over the country to lend their aid and support to help. We see total strangers helping neighbors and friends and people they've never met. You don't see people concerning themselves with what nationality you are, what color your skin is, what your political leanings are. None of that matters because good people react in the time of need. If you waste your time watching and listening to all of this mainstream media crap about how divided the nation is and how we're going to go to civil war, you know, those people should be ashamed of themselves for adding fuel to a fire when the overwhelming majority of the population is nothing like that. You know, they can't wait to rush out with their cameras and film some lowlifes turning over a car, or breaking into buildings, or putting on masks and marching with baseball bats, or all that nonsense. That is such a minor part of this country. And yet our beloved media is so eager and they're so willing to do anything for ratings. They would be willing to sacrifice the welfare of a nation to make points for themselves. And the same goes with a lot of these racists and these political people and all this stuff. They are such a minor part of society, yet they get all the attention because they are the loudest and their most disgusting acts. So the thing that we're seeing with this horrible hurricane is good people. Here's what good people do. Good people help people that are in need. They're going in their own boats and rescuing pets and helping the elderly and the mentally challenged people and the people that are in wheelchairs and everyday people doing everything they can. They're making donations. The National Guard, the first responders, the Coast Guard, the private pilots, all these people coming together to help. So although this tragedy is exactly that, a horrible tragedy, I choose to look at the things that are positive about it. And the things that are positive about it are the average majority of society who's out there doing their best to help. There are donations coming in from all over the world, and this is not just an America-only thing. This isn't a Texas-only thing. This happens all over the world, no matter where you are. It can be landslides. It can be tsunamis. It can be all these things that good people come to the aid of other people. And I hope, if anything, this hurricane will remind the majority of you how good the world is. Yes, there are some people out there who just live their life in this constant state of misery. They're mad. They're upset at the world. They feel that the world shortchanged them. So they only look for the bad, and they go around and it's almost like a disease. They're trying to infect everybody around them because they want everybody to be as equally as unhappy as they are. So they do it by spreading their misery. That's what the media has become. They are misery merchants. So I say, watch to see what's going on, but don't let them, because they're going to start reporting on looting. Yes, there's going to be the low forms of life who see this as an opportunity to go steal something. Those people are such a tiny percentage of society. They should be locked up, stuck in a cage, and forgotten as far as I'm concerned, because they're the lowest forms of life. But all of the good, the rest of the world, the good is what I hope you guys take from this. And I hope that everybody can see some of the positive things that will come from this. All right, let me get off my soapbox. You're not here to listen to me spout off my brilliance. You're here to learn about prehistoric life. Before we do that, I want to remind everybody, and for those of you that this may be your first time to either listen to the podcast on my page, dinosaurgeorgepodcast.com, or for those of you watching the podcast on my YouTube channel, which you can find it on Dinosaur George. Go to YouTube and search me under Dinosaur George and are watching this. In case you didn't know, we reduced the pricing on our catalog dramatically. We made really big cuts. And, I had a couple of people write to me and go, man, what's going on? Is something bad happening? Let me just explain why we did what we did. I pay insurance to insure all of the merchandise that we have in our warehouse. And the way the insurance is calculated is there's sort of clusters. It's like if you have from $5,000 to $10,000 worth of inventory, your insurance cost will be this. If you have $10,001 to $20,000, your insurance will be this. Well, my insurance has climbed so high recently that we realized we're just above the tier line to where if we drop down our inventory amount, we pay considerably less insurance. So that's literally why we did it. That is the only reason why we did it. We reduced the prices. Some of these things have been dropped down to cost, our actual cost. And once we eliminate the inventory that I want to eliminate, the prices, then those sale prices will ultimately go away. And those sale prices are almost across the board. Very few items weren't affected by it. And so even things like $6 claws, $7 teeth, and by the way, everything on my site is a replica. It's not real. $6 and $7 items were discounted 20%. So that's still a lot of money being taken off of even the smaller things. So it's not like you have to go out and you have to, buy something giant to take advantage of this. These sale prices are good on almost everything. You can see everything at store.dinosaurgeorge.com. That's where you'll find all the information. All right. So what is the topic of this show? Well, I've decided to make it dinosaurs and natural disasters. What did dinosaurs do during these natural disasters, like a hurricane? What did they do? What did any animal do? Certainly all animals have to deal with it, but I want to focus on dinosaurs. What did they do? How did a dinosaur survive having trillions of gallons of rain dumped on it? What could it do? Now, humans, of course, we have an advantage that we can, see these things building by satellites, and we can predict their path and project what's going to happen. We're not always right, but we have that advantage. But I think animals have an advantage over us. We see all the time in modern animals their ability to take steps when something like this is coming. Let me give you a couple of my mind just went blank. Examples. Let me give you some examples. Seabirds, they don't hang around till the day the hurricane arrives. Seabirds, a lot of them either head out to the ocean to float on the water and ride it out, or they head inland long before the storm arrives. How do they know it's coming? Another example, modern cows. Prior to a huge cold front coming, we see cows will oftentimes group together, turn their rears towards the direction of the incoming cold front, and prepare for it. In Indonesia, when that huge tsunami hit several years ago, there were reports of lowland elephants, forest elephants, making their way up to the upper lands, up into the hill country, up into the uplands. And nobody could understand why are these animals that spend all their life here traveling there, and then the next thing you know, we have these tsunamis that hit. How can these animals sense these things? Is it barometric pressure? Do they feel something in their body? Is it observations of clouds or patterns? Is it a change in a magnetic field? Those things I can't say. I don't know. I don't have any idea what they are. I don't understand how, but I will tell you that animals have a sense of these things. Another example. When I was a little kid, I was in my backyard and I was with my grandmother, and we were watching this big nest of ants, these big red ants. We call them harvester ants. I don't know what their scientific name is. They're big red ants. They sting, but they don't hurt anything like a bullet ant or anything like that. But they're real painful. But anyway, I'm watching this nest, and these ants are going 95 miles an hour, faster than I've ever seen them work. And I told my grandmother, wow, look how fast these ants are moving. And my grandmother said, that's because there's a storm coming. Now, this was not during the time of Weather Channel. This was back in the 70s. And I went, what? A storm is coming? So I thought Grandma was nuts. Grandma was a little nuts, but that's a different story. I'm kidding, Grandma. If you're up there listening to me, I'm kidding. How did she know this? How did the ants know this? Well, 3 days later, we get this heavy storm, and it hits me. Oh my gosh, those ants were working to prepare for the storm. They sensed it coming. I think humans had, at one point, the ability to be better connected to the environment and be able to predict this sort of stuff as well. Native Americans here in North America, they were living along the coast. They were dealing with hurricanes. How did they deal with it? I think they, like other animals, had the ability to sense it. I don't know what that ability is. I don't know what you referred to. I don't know how to explain it, but I think they did. And maybe it was as simple as watching other animals, maybe other animals. Now, as humans, I believe because we have altered our environment so much that at least in the more advanced civilizations, we have lost our connection with the environment. We don't sense like we do. I think that when you look at people that are in, say, less developed countries, I think they still possess some of that. We're in air-conditioned and heated buildings. We control everything. We've lost our need to be aware of the environment because we have the ability to alter it or take our environment with us wherever we go. So I think humans have lost that. But I think modern animals absolutely have the ability to predict and be aware of in advance things. So that leads me to the topic of this podcast. Did dinosaurs? I don't think there's any reason why they wouldn't. I think there are two things that animals have. One is an inherent set of senses, and then there are the learned senses or habits or behaviors. Behaviors is a better word than senses and habits. Behaviors. I think animals are born with the ability to be able to survive almost anything that arises in their environment. Then I also think they are taught by their parents to learn other things about their environment. When you're born, you may not know what a Tyrannosaurus Rex is, but inherently you know something about that is not what I want to be around, so I'm not going to approach it. I think what you're taught by your parents is how to get away from it. See what I mean? I think you're born with the sense to know to stay away, and then I think you're taught the behavior of what is the best way to stay away. That's what I believe animals have today, and I think dinosaurs had it as well. So let's take a look at some of the individuals, and let's talk about ways that they might be able to deal with natural disasters. In natural disasters, I'm talking about flooding. I'm talking about hurricanes and tornadoes, maybe even things like hailstorms. Imagine being a sauropod and getting pelted nonstop. Where do you hide? Where do you hide when? I guess you just put your head down and wait for it to end. But how did these animals deal with this? One way that I believe dinosaurs would have dealt with things like this is to understand to put themselves out of harm's way. So, for instance, migrating. Their migration patterns could be something as simple as during X time of year, we don't go to the ocean because the ocean is where these horrible storms come from. So you simply make sure you're not in the area. That alone is one way that a dinosaur could cope with something like a hurricane, trying to put yourself out of harm's way. Other ways could be during the rainy season, you don't spend as much time in the lowland flood areas, you head up into the upland areas so that you're not as susceptible to being wiped out by flooding, flash flooding, unexpected floods. It could even pertain to forest fires. You know, dinosaurs would have dealt with fires just like any other modern animal does. Again, with humans, though, we go in and put them out. So most of our animals aren't put in the same situation that a dinosaur would be. So I suspect that they probably put themselves out of harm's way. But let's talk about some of the individual specimen species. Let's talk about hadrosaurs. So what would a hadrosaur do? Well, we know from track evidence that hadrosaurs certainly did visit and walk along shorelines of oceans and lakes and rivers. Clearly, they have to have access to water. I suspect a hadrosaur would have been a pretty decent swimmer. I don't think there's any reason why it wouldn't be a good swimmer. So immediately, hadrosaurs have a little bit of an advantage to be able to handle things like a flood because at least they could swim. And that's a big part of escaping a flood. Now, the other things hadrosaurs have is they have the ability to walk on two legs, get up and run on two legs, which allows them to cover greater amount of distance. And if they have that sense of understanding weather, that would give them the opportunity to get out of harm's way before they ever had to do it. So I think hadrosaurs would have been able to handle things like forest fires because their ability to move quickly. I think they would have been able to handle flooding because their ability to swim. And also keep in mind that having your nose on top of your head is very effective when you're swimming because it allows you don't get water up your nose as you're swimming. So having your nostrils on top of your head is a very good thing. On top of the end of your nose is a very good thing, and that would have helped them dramatically. What about ceratopsians? Well, these guys are obviously a little different because, first of all, their nose is right smack in the front. So they're probably having to swim with their head up, which is a disadvantage. And also, that frill on some of the big frilled guys, man, that thing must have been like pushing a boat through the water, trying to swim unless you can lean your head far enough back and do the doggy paddle and look up as you're swimming. We know from evidence in places like in Canada at Pipestone Creek, here we have hundreds and hundreds of Pachyrhinosaurus that all died together that appears that they were crossing a river. Now, whether it was during a flood, we don't know, but they definitely were trying to cross a river. And there's a couple of things that could have happened to them. It may not have even been a natural disaster. It just may have been a common standard river that these dinosaurs needed to cross because they were going to find better food or they're migrating for whatever reason. But two things could have happened. It could have been a flood, And even though they're good swimmers, it just overwhelmed them. The waters maybe continued to rise. Maybe when the first guys go in and they come out the other side, the water's not bad. But by the time the end of the herd finally makes it in, the flood waters have increased in speed and ferocity. And that may have been the reason. But there's also another reason and a possible explanation for it. Animals individually are good swimmers. Most animals are. I think ceratopsians were. Pachyrhinosaurus was. So I think Pachyrhinosauruses are going in and they're swimming across and everything's fine. But here's the problem. When you go in on one side and you can't see the other side, you just keep piling in behind the guys in front of you. The guys on the other side get to the other bank, and as they exit the water, they are dragging water with them out. And that's turning the other side into a real goopy mess. You have dirt, you have mud, you have water mixed together, and you have thousands of feet basically mixing that stuff up into a nasty soup. So the first guys made it fine. Next couple are having problems getting out because they're slipping and sliding. They're trying to get their footing. Well, everybody's still piling in on the other side of the river, and everybody on this side's trying to get out, but suddenly there's a traffic jam. Now, everybody in the middle is panicked because these guys in the front are backing up and these guys in the back are moving forward, and panic ensues. Animals start stepping on each other, panicking, and that could have been why so many of them died at Pipestone Creek. But whatever the case was, it demonstrated that certainly dinosaurs were put in the position of having to deal with these kind of problems, whether they be natural occurring or created by panic. But I think ceratopsians fleeing a forest fire, I think they have as much advantage as any animal. During things like hurricanes, well, they just simply can move up into the upper areas to get out of the flooding. So I think that they would have been able to survive some of these things fine. Things like tornadoes, you can't predict. You can't predict anything about a tornado. If you're in the way of a tornado, you're doomed. With ceratopsians, at least they have a low center of gravity where they're close to the ground, and the center of gravity gives them some sort of stability, but not if they get a direct hit. Nothing's going to survive that. Okay, so theropods. Well, same thing I feel about theropods that I felt about duckbills, and that is they're probably good swimmers. They certainly are capable of getting up and moving when they move. I think theropods have the advantage of being able to be in a better situation of survival when it comes to things like fire, floods, tornadoes. Everything goes back to man. Can you imagine that being out in a hailstorm? There's not much you can do. There's not a whole lot you can do. I mean, you can duck under a tree. You can, lean up against the side of a cliff in hopes that it shields you. Makes me wonder, though, do dinosaurs have a higher tolerance for pain than what we probably think? I've watched cows stand in a field and just get pelted by hail. And they just hunker up together and they stand there and take it. And, they're not screaming and all that other stuff you would expect. They just stand there, go and get it over with, and then they move on about their business. 2 seconds after a hailstorm's gone, you'll see cows start to eat again. It's almost like either they're like, well, I can't do anything about it, might as well get a bit to eat, or it's, I didn't really feel it that much. Maybe they're tougher than we think. So maybe some of these dinosaurs were, maybe theropods just simply, that hail bounced off of them. If you're like a Carnotaurus, you've got what looks like to be little pieces of body armor. So maybe that's something that's helpful for them. Sauropods, now you're getting into some problems with sauropods. Now, clearly, their height advantage gives them opportunity to see things from a distance, to see a fire before they smell the smoke, to see floodwaters coming, maybe, to see off in the horizon. And maybe that gave them enough early notice to move those massive bodies into an area that's better protected. Maybe they were the early warning animals. Maybe they got a little, because they would have needed it. I don't care how fast we think they are. They couldn't keep up a fast speed for a long time. So they're not going to outrun things. I think with enough notice, they would be able to at least take whatever action it is. I don't know what it would be. Boy, I don't know how you deal with forest fires unless you just simply let the flames come close and then you hold your breath and run as fast as you can to get through it. I've seen images of tortoises doing that in Africa. huge fire coming across the plains. Tortoises wait. You would think they would tuck inside of their shell, which they do. They tuck in that shell, but the minute the flames get to them, they come bursting out and make as fast a move as they can to get as far away from as they can. And that's how they kind of get through it. So maybe sauropods could do the same thing. But here's the ones that I have the problem with. And this is where I want everybody's input. If you listen on the podcast, if you do get a chance to go to my page, dinosaurgeorgepodcast.com, you can leave a comments. If you're watching on YouTube, I hope you leave the comments in the section. What would ankylosaurs and nodosaurs do? Because I don't understand them at all. They're not going to outrun anything. I don't know if they could swim. I don't know if they were good swimmers. They may have been spectacular. They may have floated around like a little tugboat. But I can't imagine they did. I saw a hypothesis once. Somebody said where they felt that if they inhaled and filled their lungs, that would give them some buoyancy. And that sounds like an interesting thing. But the problem is, at some point, you got to exhale and you got to take another breath. So if that's the difference between floating or not, the first time you take your breath, you die. But I don't know what they could do. Such a disadvantage. Those animals are so disadvantaged, in my opinion, when it comes to things like this. How do they cross a river? How do they cross just a standard river during regular times? Not speaking about, even if it's not running or it's slow moving, how do they cross? Do they simply hold their breath and like a little tank walk underneath and come out the other side? Do they float? I don't know. Now, ankylosaurs have a tremendous sense of smell. You know, I mentioned earlier that sauropods may have been the early warning dinosaurs. What if the ankylosaurs, what if everybody in the environment watches the ankylosaurs, and when all of a sudden they start heading up north, everybody follows? Because maybe they have the ability to smell moisture in the air, smell rain in the air, smell smoke in the air. Maybe with their incredible sense of smell, they had an advantage. Clearly, all animals have to be able to deal with natural disasters, because if not, if it wipes out an entire species, one big hurricane, and there's no more ankylosaurs or nodosaurs. So if you guys can think of a way that you think they survived, I would like to see your answers. I would like to see them. Maybe I can read some of yours on an upcoming podcast. Hey, one other thing about podcasting. Would you guys like the opportunity, if I posted a date and a time, would you like the opportunity to just call me on Skype and ask your question live? If you're under the age of 18, I have to make sure your parents are aware that you're doing this for me to be able to use your image. What I could do on the video, if you're watching the podcast on the video, I'll put a split screen and put you on one side and me on the other. And if you would like that opportunity, if you think that would be fun to do, somebody mentioned that to me on Facebook, and somebody mentioned that to me, and I think it's the same person, also mentioned it in the notes on one of my podcasts on YouTube, where they said, you know, that would be kind of fun. I think you're right. I think that would be a lot of fun. So if that's something you guys would like to do, maybe leave some comments and let me know if you think that would be fun. Or maybe I could do it on Facebook and just do a live remote on Facebook and do it there. But of course, then all I can do is read your questions. But maybe if you'd like to do that, maybe I'll set up a day where I'm just going to sit here at my computer and watch Skype. And when somebody calls, I'll answer it. We'll chat for a minute. I'll turn on my recording device. I'll record it. You'll ask your question. I'll hang up, wait for the next one to call. Maybe I'll try to do that. That might be kind of fun. Send me a post on my podcast page or post on Facebook if you think that would be a fun thing to do. Now, if you're young, you'll have to have mom or dad or a guardian be there, not while you're asking your question, but they're going to have to pop their face on the camera and say, hey, it's okay for my child to do this. I would just need that assurance, because the last thing I want to do is put a minor, or anybody for that matter, put their face on YouTube if they're not interested in doing that. So anyway, let's think about it. All right, so there's your homework, everybody. How could an ankylosaur or a nodosaur be able to survive? Let's focus on a flood. How could they survive a flood? Think about that, post your answers, and then I'm going to take a quick short break. And when I come back, I'm going to answer some Ask Dinosaur George questions.
Bring Dinosaur George's traveling exhibit to your school, museum, or city. This is the largest exhibit of its kind in North America and will turn any facility into a natural history museum. You'll see things like prehistoric mammals, giant fish, ancient reptiles, and of course, dinosaurs. It's affordable, amazing, and will be an event you'll never forget. See complete details at dinosaurgeorge.com or call us toll-free, 888-487-7478. Bring Dinosaur George's Traveling Museum to your community today.
It's time to Ask Dinosaur George. In this segment, George answers your questions about paleontology. If you would like to leave a voice message, call us at 210-888-9077. This is not a toll-free call, so children, please ask your parents' permission. If you would like to submit your question in writing, go to dinosaurgeorge.com and click the Ask Dinosaur George page. Questions are chosen at random and we clear all messages monthly. So if you have a question about paleontology, ask Dinosaur George.
All right, this first one is a question that was submitted through the Skype line. You didn't leave your name or your city, so I'm sorry I can't recognize you, but they were good questions, so here we go.
Hello, I just want to ask Dinosaur George a few questions. My first question is, how did you make Jurassic Fight Club? And my second question is, what is your favorite type of raptor?
Well, thank you, my young friend, for sending those questions. Let me get to your second question, which is, who is my favorite raptor? It's Deinonychus. Love Deinonychus, always have. Found it to be an amazing animal, an amazing, just simply amazing creature. So Deinonychus would be my favorite raptor, followed by Utah raptor and now Dakota raptor. But to your first question, how do we make Jurassic Fight Club? Well, here's what we did. When we sat down with the History Channel, and this is something that a lot of people don't understand, the network owns the show. The network decides what you're going to do. So I had a lot of people write and say, why did you do this? Why did you do that? It's not my choice. The network owns everything. They own they own everything. The footage, the rights, they own it all. So they're the producers within the network will tell you what they want you to do. So here's what we did. We proposed this idea, and fortunately they went ahead and accepted it. And that is, we took a show concept and we divided each show into two segments. The first half is factual based, where we talk about the size and the specifics about the animal. That's where I brought in paleontologists from all over the country to be able to tell us their ideas of what this animal's like, how it behaved, how big it was, give us all the latest technology. The second half of the show was the fight sequence, which was all fabricated. It's fiction. I wasn't there, so there's no way I can tell you what happened. But what I did is we took any place where evidence of two different species of dinosaurs were found in association with each other, or evidence that could be applied to one and another animal. We put them together, and I sat down and literally imagined in my mind a fight between them. How would they act? I based those fights on modern animal behavior. I've studied modern animals, how they behave. So I took their behavior and I looked at the body design and the weaponry and all of the things that I learned about these individual animals, and I applied those together. The way we created the fight scenes was we would go out and just film out in the woods, out in the desert, out in these places, just film. Nothing there, just film. Then these amazing animators that worked with us would go in and literally create, using CG, create the animals there. They would then make the animals do the things that I envisioned when I came up with the fictional fight. So we sat down, they put a camera on me. I just literally started talking about this fight between these animals. That's how it was worked. It wasn't scripted. I didn't write anything down. I just envisioned in my mind, here's how I think it would happen. Then the animators listened to those segments and then made the animals do the things that I said they were doing. So that's basically how we did it. We created a show that was half factual based and half fictional based, and I incorporated my idea, my guess of how the animals behaved in a fight based on the animal itself, and based on modern animal behavior. Great questions, my friends. Thank you. My friend, thank you for taking time. All right, this first question that was sent in on the Ask Dinosaur George page comes from Jeffrey from Dubai. Let me say this, though. These two questions that Jeffrey asked were also asked by about 6 different people, all under a different name. And I think one of two things happened. Either somebody posted something on my YouTube page and others read it and went, hey, that would make a good question. That might be the case. Or it's the same person just posting it under various names. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other. Your name isn't important and your country isn't important. That doesn't help you get selected. The selection is just made randomly and then based on the quality of the question. So if there is a Jeffrey from Dubai, thank you for writing to me, Jeffrey. If it's somebody else and you're not from Dubai or wherever you're from, it's okay. You can tell me your real name. All right. So Jeffrey from Dubai wants to know, why are hadrosaurs so common despite having no armor or weapons, while ankylosaurs, who are heavily armored and heavily weaponed, are very rare? Why is that? What a brilliant question. What a brilliant question. What a great observation. Second question is, what was the first animal capable of producing milk? Okay, I'll answer your second one because that's the easiest one. I don't know. I don't know who it was. It's got to be a mammal. I just don't know what it would be. I don't study early mammals very much. I'm not very up to speed on that. I wish I knew, but I suspect it has to be a mammal. I just don't know who it would be. I don't know, but that's a very good question. Now to your first question, why so many hadrosaurs? Why so few ankylosaurs? Here's why. I think it has to do with hadrosaurs' ability to adapt. And I mean by that, look at an ankylosaur. Look at its build. He is relegated to eating food that is the height of his head or lower and nothing else. He's not going to rear up on his hind legs. He's not going to jump up and grab something. He's not capable of doing that. And that means the food source is very, very limited. And that means the ankylosaurs then don't have the same opportunities as a hadrosaur. Hadrosaurs can eat from the ground to as high up as they can reach, which is considerably higher than ankylosaurs. So therefore, they've got all of this opportunity to eat a wider variety of food. So let's say during a drought, if you get to choose from 15 different plants, maybe 2 or 3 of those are more drought resistant and you're more likely to have more food. But if you are only eating things at the ground up to the height of your head, if you're an ankylosaur, that limits how much food source is available to you. So I think that's one of the reasons. And the way nature works is nature keeps this balance about herself. In order to ensure that there's enough ankylosaurs to breed and populate, they certainly have adapted to that short stature. And so they're given all this magnificent armor because they're slow and they're bulky and they don't have the opportunity to get up and run away. So they don't have to worry so much about being eaten. But the limited amount of food available to them keeps their numbers in check. Whereas with the hadrosaurs may have been more like deer. You know, like here in Texas, deer are everywhere. Why? Because deer can eat from different heights and they have the ability to flee predators and they have some other opportunities to be able to get away. So in Texas, you'd think, well, wouldn't there be thousands of armadillos because they have armor? And wouldn't there be just a few deer? Well, it's the exact opposite, and it's for that reason. Being slow and being low to the ground gives you limitations or puts limitations on you that can affect your ability to perpetuate the species. So nature balances it by saying, yes, there's more hadrosaurs, but hadrosaurs are the prime target of the carnivores. So there's more hadrosaurs, but they're being preyed upon more by other animals. So Jeffrey from Dubai, if you indeed are a Jeffrey and you are from Dubai, thank you so much for taking time to write to me. All right, Christian from Brighton, Colorado. Hello, Dr. Blessing. Hey, Christian, how nice to hear from you. I'm not a doctor, but thank you very much. Although I know a lot of psychiatrists. I hang out with a lot of psychiatrists, like dozens. I have caused more psychiatrists to quit their careers. Wait, Did I say all that out loud? It's a joke. All right. So Christian says, I'm writing to you with a couple of questions regarding Tyrannosaurus Rex. Did T-Rex have an articulated tongue? First time anybody's ever asked that. Question number 2, did Tyrannosaurus Rex have lips? And if so, would its teeth have shown when its mouth was closed? And question number 3, could Tyrannosaurus Rex move its tail so that it essentially wrapped around the creature's body? Thanks so much for your time and insight. Sincerely, Christian. Thank you, Christian, for your courtesy and your politeness and being such a fine person. So question number 1, did they have articulated tongues? What's an articulated tongue? It's the ability to move your tongue around. I think they probably did, only because the tongue is used to move food in and around the mouth. Yes, secondarily, it's used to be able to talk and to pronounce words, and we use our tongue to be able to pronounce and talk. But we require that. Dinosaurs probably didn't need the tongue to be able to do that. So then the only other function it would have would be to be able to move the food. Now, when I say that, you look at some animals, look at birds like ducks and geese. All they can do is move it up and down. They can't wiggle it around very much. But ducks and geese are not biting off big chunks of meat. Now, what about hawks? What about eagles? Can eagles move? Do eagles have the ability to move their tongue around? I don't know. I don't know, man. That's a very good question, Christian. I guess my answer would be I cannot say with any certainty whether they did or not. You know, one of the people I'm trying to interview is Pete Larson from the Black Hills Institute, who is one of the foremost paleontologists on tyrannosaurs. That would be a good question to ask him. Unfortunately, I don't get to interview many people at this time of the year because they're all out in the field working. All right, so question number 2, did T-Rex have lips? And if so, would its teeth have shown when its mouth was closed? Well, the function of lips is twofold. One, it's to keep food in your mouth. But the other reason why in the animal kingdom is they can be used to portray emotion. And what I mean by that is that if you have a lip that covers most or all of your teeth, then when you are upset, think of a dog. You walk up to a dog and he doesn't like you. What does he do? He raises his lips and he shows you his teeth, and that is an international sign for get away from me. Well, Tyrannosaurus Rex may have had the same use to be able to display. Let's say it approaches a rival or a mate or potential mate. You either want to display, I'm perfectly normal, I'm not going to hurt you, look, my teeth are hiding, or you want to bare your teeth and make sure that that person or that thing sees them. So if it did have functioning lips, they would have served that purpose. Now, did they? Well, I believe they did, and I base that off of you ever see the skull of a Tyrannosaurus Rex? You see little tiny holes going all the way around the mouth. Those are attachments where blood vessels were bringing nutrition to the mouth. But they also may have functioned as a way to move the lips. Maybe there was musculature attached to those things. I don't know. But they would have had the ability, at least a little bit of an ability, to bare their teeth. So maybe they did. Now, whether they had them or not, if they had lips, you still would have seen the longest of its upper teeth extruding, hanging down. The lips could not have been that long. They would have gotten in the way of everything. So I think you would have seen its teeth regardless if they had lips or not, but you would only see the big dentaries, the big bone crushers. And finally, could his tail be wrapped around the creature's body? In my opinion, Christian, absolutely not. Their tails are not flexible like that. The bone structure doesn't allow for the tail to be twisted that far. Plus, it would take an incredible amount of muscles all the way down the length of the tail to curl the entire tail back over the body. You might be able to whip your tail around, but you cannot curl that tail without musculature going all the way to the end that could be contracted and released to move it. And T-Rexes don't have that on their tail as far as I know. So here's the other reason why their tails were not flexible like that. When an animal or you and I are running as fast as we can in a straight line, there's an invisible force called momentum that is basically wanting you to continue moving forward. It's a perpetual force that is caused by your mass being moved. So you're running as fast as you can and you want to cut really quickly. And what happens to most of us? We wipe out and trip and fall because momentum, your body simply can't turn that way. But if you have a stiffened tail, it will help counter the effects of momentum and allow you to take a sharper turn than you could otherwise without that tail. So you don't want it to be a whip-like floppy tail, because then it doesn't do what you need it to do. Think about this. When you see somebody walking on a high wire and they're holding that great big pole, that pole is helping them with balance. That pole is they're able to move their inertia or their mass from one side to the other to maintain balance. Well, imagine the function of that pole being moved around to your butt. That pole, it's not going to help you balance from side to side walking across a tightrope. Wouldn't that be a sight to see a Tyrannosaurus Rex walking across a tightrope? But anyway, I digress. But anyway, what that tail will do will offset the momentum when he's trying to change directions. Doesn't mean he can take these dramatic curves. He's not going to run like a cheetah, but a cheetah is a prime example of an animal that uses that tail to be able to maintain its balance. So I don't believe that it was using that tail. You couldn't curl yourself around it. I think they would have used it for balance. All right, Sam from Texas. Hey, George, I'm a fairly recent listener to your podcast, and I enjoyed it immensely. Good, Sam. Thank you very much, and welcome. Sam's question is it possible that there may be a North American equivalent to Therizinosaurus that lived alongside T-Rex, Triceratops, and Dakotaraptor, and maybe it just hasn't been discovered? Well, absolutely it could, because they found the earlier Therizinosaur in Utah. So clearly the Therizinosaurs were here, and there's no reason, Sam, that they couldn't be here. All right, let's see. Let's do Kevin and he writes, why do I have to fill this part in? You don't have to, Kevin. What that means is, for you that are listening, on the form, the Ask Dinosaur George form, it asks for your first name and then where you're from. The only reason why I do that is twofold. One, to demonstrate how our listeners are all over the world. We get questions from the Netherlands and from Italy, Spain, and Germany, and France, and Russia, and China, all over the world. So that's one reason. The other reason why is to give you recognition for your question. Because if you say, my name is Kevin, well, there's 40 million Kevins in the world. But if you say, my name is Kevin, and I'm from, I don't know, Duluth, Indiana. I don't even know if that's a city. But let's say you're from there. Well, yes, there's still a lot of Kevins there, but at least you have the ability to say, see, that was my question. So it's to give you recognition for coming up with your question, and it's for me to be able to demonstrate where you're from. Is it necessary? Not at all, clearly, because yours got chosen. So Kevin says, are there any fossil evidence of hibernation? Yes, there is. Timimus, a dinosaur that was found in Australia. He's a ornithomimid, I believe. When they found Timimus, they did a thin cutting of the bone and saw the growth patterns. And what they saw was Timimus went through periods of growth and then periods of non-growth, then periods of growth and then periods of non-growth. And they compared that to the bone of polar bears, where you see they're growing, then they stop, then they're growing, then they stop. The stop points are hibernation points, because their body, you don't want your body to continue to grow. I don't know what just happened to my headphones. You don't want your body to continue to grow when you're hibernating, because you don't want to use all the energy for that. You want to be able to conserve as much of your energy as you can while you're hibernating. And so therefore, I think that's an example. And the reason why Timimus did it is because in Australia, they went through months of sheer darkness and freezing temperatures. So yes, I do believe there is evidence of that very thing. All right, let me see. Let's do one more. Let's do two more. This is from David from North Carolina. Hi, Dinosaur George. So I was making tiny models of Allosauridae, and I made a concavinator, and then I moved on to an Acrocanthosaurus. While making these two, I realized that these two are the only two Allosauridae members who have prominent spinal features. So my question to you is, could that have been because they were closely related, or was it because they just both happened to evolve these features? Thank you and have a great day. Well, thank you, David. What a brilliant question. And hey, I'm glad to hear you're a sculptor. That's really cool. I couldn't do anything like that. So I'm very impressed with your ability. So, David, Acrocanthosaurus and concavinator are not that closely related. They're not that closely related to each other. So I believe that they both evolved those odd features at the same time for probably the same reason, but not because they were immediately related. So what I believe that, well, you have things called convergent evolution where two different animals can come up with the same basic features. And I think that's the case in this particular case, is that they both use them either to attract a mate or challenge or whatever they use them for. But I think they develop them independently of one another. They just happen to both belong to the same basic family. And finally, James from Seattle, Washington. Hello, DG. Ceratosaurus is one of my favorite dinosaurs. Good choice, James. I was curious as to who would win in a fight between Ceratosaurus or Utahraptor. In James's opinion, he believes Ceratosaurus would have been too large for a single Utahraptor to take down. Well, James, I'm inclined to agree with you that if we're dealing with one Utahraptor and a full-grown big Ceratosaurus, then perhaps Utahraptor, that would be too much for a Utahraptor. But other than that, Ceratosaurus is an archaic dinosaur, meaning very old family group. He retains four fingers. He has some other features that make him a very ancient species, whereas Utahraptor is sort of the Ferrari of the species. Now you've got somebody that's fast and he's quick and he's agile and he's smart and he's got massive weapons. So I think Utahraptor would have been more than a match for a Ceratosaurus. But if it was a full-grown Ceratosaurus, then chances are very likely that even Utahraptor, as big as he is, may have kept his distance from him. Well, all right, you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you had a good time listening to everything. I enjoyed it immensely. Please follow me on Facebook. You can look me up under George Blassing, Blasing, or you can look me up under Dinosaur George. Follow me on Facebook. You can also find me on Twitter. You can find that. Look for Dino George or Dinosaur George on Twitter as well. For those of you watching the podcast on YouTube, thank you guys very much. I hope you enjoyed it. For those of you listening to the podcast, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to that as well. For everybody out there, take care of yourself. Take care of the people around you. Be kind to one another. And for everybody in Texas, Godspeed to you all. Take care, everybody. I'll see you.
Thank you for listening to the Dinosaur George Show. Please follow us on our social media links and join our mailing list. If you're interested in having Dinosaur George speak at your event, please visit our website at dinosaurgeorge.com. Until next time, keep digging for clues about the past.